Bright is the Netflix original film directed by David Ayer, starring Will Smith and Joel Edgerton. But I think more than directing or acting, it should also be noted that this film was written by Max Landis, who some of you may or may not know as sort of like a mad scientist of screenwriting. I've seen several videos and interviews with Max Landis where he talks about these crazy movie ideas that he has, or even where he's come up with entire movie plots like right off the top of his head, and they're always like way out of the box, but more oftentimes than less, there's things that I would love to see. That's what made me so happy when I found out that this idea and this concept ended up over at Netflix as opposed to any of the other big movie studios, because I knew ultimately that Netflix probably had the balls to keep this at its original intense sort of crazy vision that Max Landis originally had. And I remember when I first found out about this movie, I found out what the concept was and what the sort of central idea was going to be. And the first thought that I had was like, oh, okay, this is David Ayer, so it's going to kind of be like End of Watch meets Lord of the Rings. And that is some of the highest praise that I can actually give this movie, is its originality. In this era of, oh, Hollywood's broken, Hollywood can't come up with any original ideas, which actually isn't true. But in this time of where people assume the fact that all Hollywood does is come out with remakes and sequels, it's so nice and refreshing to see such a sort of out there and original concept actually make it to consumers' homes. And like I said, that's one of the reasons why I'm so glad this actually did end up with Netflix, because if it had ended up with one of the other big studios, I'm sure it either would have ended up extremely altered and changed from Max's original vision, or it probably wouldn't have gotten made altogether. I mean, come on, when you're talking about a modern day telling of elves and humans and fairies and orcs and even freaking centaurs living in modern day Los Angeles, that screams sort of like, it's a little bit out of the box for us. I think that's a little bit too crazy for anything that we would like to do. I'm not sure audiences would go out and see that. That's why I'm so glad this ended up at Netflix. By the way, there are freaking centaur cops in this movie, and that's worth your monthly subscription right there. Another thing I absolutely loved in this movie is the amount of detail and the painstaking effort that the filmmakers go through in order to make this world feel like a lived-in world. And they make it feel like you could just step right outside and walk right into this world, and practically nothing's changed except for the people that you would bump into. They do such an amazing job of making this world feel lived in and used and sort of grimy and grungy and just overall just realistic. However, Bright is not a perfect movie. There are a few issues that I had. One being, this entire movie, the themes within are supposed to take on ideas of racism and sort of social injustice between the several different classes, like class warfare. And eventually this movie takes it to a point to where it's sort of beating that idea over your head, and it eventually sort of comes off as cheesy, like how intense some of those scenes start to get. It for all the realism that's inside this movie, those scenes start to become less and less realistic the more they sort of beat you over the head with their ideas and what they're trying to tell you. In this movie, they definitely set up a definitive sort of class structure where you've got your elves at the top, the cream of the crop. They're the rich and famous. They're the celebrities. They're the Kardashians, basically. And then in the middle, you've got the humans, sort of the middle class, obviously. And then at the bottom, you've got the orcs, who are obviously the lower class. They're the ones who get treated like garbage. And trust me, I appreciate the ideas and the metaphors that this movie is going for. I just kind of wish that they had taken those and just been a little bit more subtle with it and made it more of like an underlying idea as opposed to just like, here it is. Another big issue I had with this movie is some pretty terrible dialogue. It's just one of those things where as realistic as this movie depicts itself, there are lines and things that people say in the movie that it's just things that people would not say in real life. And some weird, awkward sort of uses of humor in bits and pieces. There are moments in this movie that try to come off as funny, and it it just doesn't land, unfortunately. And of course, I think the biggest problem I have with Bright is, as you are watching the movie, about halfway, maybe 2/3 of the way through, I mean, this is just me. Maybe it's different for you. I ultimately was able to see what happens in the ending coming a mile away, which is such a shame because I fell in love with the world that this movie sets up and the setting, this realistic setting that it sets up. And the ending just sort of comes and goes. And ultimately it's going to be forgettable in the long run, I think. But I'm excited for where this story ultimately goes if we get to see another one, which I think we will. With all of that said, I think Bright is a beautifully shot, extremely fun, and most of all, original movie. I think if you find some spare time over this long holiday weekend, and if you have access to Netflix, I think you should definitely check it out. I think it would be worth your time. And if you do end up checking out Bright this weekend, come back to this video when you get a chance to check it out and let me know what you guys thought about it in the comments below. Do you guys agree with what I thought or do you disagree? Guys, I give Bright a B. Guys, thanks so much for checking out this review. I wanted to remind everybody that every Wednesday here on the HeroShot YouTube channel, we do the HeroShot podcast now as a live show. So come back and check us out every Wednesday, 8 p.m. Central Standard Time. And you will be in for a show where we discuss all of the biggest and latest news in the world of movies, TV shows, and comics, and it's just a good time to be had by all. Thanks so much for checking out this review, heroes, and I will see you in the next one.